Hi, I would like to welcome you all to another session of our conference cycle, New Directions in Social Hermeneutics. This is already our fifth session, and today we are going to discuss one specific philosopher, Immanuel Kant, who is, of course, one of the most important philosophers in the history of philosophy, but one who is perhaps seldom called into these kinds of debates of social philosophy. For those coming from hermeneutics or from critical theory, we are more accustomed to discussing Hegel, for instance. But now we're bridging this gap and bringing the discussion to Kant with two great Kantian scholars who are part of our group, namely Nuria Sanche Madrid from the Complutense University of Madrid, and Paulo Jesus, also our colleague and friend from the Center of Philosophy from the University of Lisbon. I'm going to do a very brief introduction to each one of them, and then we'll skip straight to the talks. They are going to give their talks straight one after the other, and then we'll leave the part of the discussion to the end of the session, and so you can ask your questions, you can field your questions directly to both presenters at the end of the session. Now we're going to follow the specific order of the program. And so I'm going to first give the floor to Nuria Sanchez Madrid, just doing a very brief presentation. She's a professor at the Complutense University of Madrid, a great Kantian scholar, also dedicated to various topics in the fields of social philosophy. She's also the PI of the Precarity Lab, a project which is hosted at the University Complutense of Madrid, and also a very close colleague, one of the very few Spanish colleagues that we have that is actively interested in what is happening in philosophy in Portugal. She speaks Portuguese, and so it's always a very great pleasure to host you, Nuria. So Professor Nuria is going to give a talk titled Kant on Labor Relations, a neglected flip side of classical republicanism. Nuria, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Gonzalo. Thank you very much for your kind invitation and your flattering introduction. And I'm very honored to take part in this cycle of conferences where I see the big community stemming from the New Hermes project that I'm very thankful to you for maintaining alive this community. I slightly changed the title of my presentation. As you see in the slides, I maintain the subject naturally, but I thought that to give an account of economic dependence from a non-ideal point of view, from a non-ideal standpoint, stemming from social philosophy or inspiring social philosophy, could perhaps give a more concrete picture of the itinerary of the path I'm trying in next 30 minutes, more or less, to present to you, to share with you. I would like to begin with a short introduction, a short scheme of the structure of the presentation. First, I will try to inspect the central role, the key role that work plays in Kant's anthropology writings. Second, I'll try to give an account of the intertwinement of labor, of work activity and citizenship, passive and active citizenship, this important distinction in Kant's republicanism. It is in Kant's political philosophy. I will try to show and to parse out the interaction, the correlation between the kind of activity I do, the subject do, performs, and the access to active citizenship, and so the access to partake as co-lawgiver in the Commonwealth. Third, I would like to parse out, to break down the case of the domestic servant in Kant's theory of right, in Kant's doctrine of right, as a paradigm of a legal legitimation, what I see, what I label as a legal legitimation of social oppression. I think the Kant's account of domestic servant allows us to analyze a kind of oppression, a social oppression, stemming from the household, and especially from the wealthy households, because the wealthy families in Prussia, in Europe, that Kant has in mind, they are able, they have the capacities to outsource tasks as caregiving, tasks as nurture, and so even the wealthy women, the wealthy wives of these heads of the European households, they are ready, they can benefit from this outsourcing of all this burden, this domestic burden. And finally, I would like to explore the role that gender, race, citizenship status, it is passive or active citizenship, and work performance, the work activity we engage in, play in Kant's theory of labor. So I'm trying to adopt an intersectional approach by doing this to cast light over non-ideal features of Kant's legal and political philosophy. I will try to also show in this vein that modern contemporary social philosophy opens a promising path for redressing Kant's Republican order or Kant Republican model, and force it to effectively embody an inclusive theory of citizenship. My aim, in the wake of interpreters as Jordan Pascoe, Elvira Vasevich, also Luke Davis, my aim is to redress Kant's republicanism in order to meet the requirements, or to meet the ideals and goals of this, of what should be an inclusive theory of citizenship. So let's go to a kind of inspiring passage from Axel Honneth that will give a general idea of the interpretation I'm trying to share with you. In a very recent book, The Working Sovereign, which contains Honneth's lectures given, I think, in 2021 in Berlin, under invitation of the Institute of Critical Theory, led by Robin Chelikates and Rael Jegi. Honneth gives an account of modern political philosophy, and especially in a discussion after the publication of the book, and after giving these lectures, in a conversation with Rael Jegi and Robin Chelikates, published in the Journal of Classical Sociology. You find the reference in the slide. Honneth is very telling about what he understands as a renounce of modern political philosophy to build up a real democratic theory of citizenship. In this vein, Honneth acknowledges that thinkers as Kant, but also Hume or Locke or Adam Smith, Scottish Enlightenment, they were aware, quite aware of the fact that dependent workers were subjugated to a foreman, to a boss, to a chief, and were not granted with an own political opinion. We have to take into account remarks that perhaps lead us to the book of Ryder Malik's Kant's Politics in Context. We have to take into account that Kant understood the ballots and the participation in the ballots as freehand sessions, so that people vote and express their own political opinion, raising their hands. So the exposure and the risk to be punished after giving a bad, under brackets, vote was a very common issue, was a very important concern for dependent workers. So Honeth is aware about this notion of political subalternity linked to precarious work and to subaltern work. But the problem for Honeth, and I quote the sentences in the text that you see highlighted, the problem is that everyone at the time, at Kant's time, at Enlightenment century, drew the wrong consequences from this. They limited suffrage and took the right to vote from those who they considered incapable of adequate participation. Instead, they could have said, we must change the constraining conditions of work. So I share the point of Honeth, and I wanted to put this passage at the beginning, at the outset of my presentation. I share Honeth's concern and also outrage against this modern current of political philosophy, because these thinkers didn't attempt to transform the structures, the domination structures that were provoking that some people, some social groups only become passive citizens, the so-called underlings of the Commonwealth, and that they cannot achieve the status of active citizens. I begin with this section heading to Kant's anthropology lectures, where the term work, the issue of work, appears as a very central point for understanding the development, the human development of dispositions, of capabilities, of abilities. As we see in this passage, in this first passage from the lectures on pedagogy, Kant's lectures on pedagogy, the human being, according to Kant, is the only animal which must work. So we could say that, as we see in the title of this section, work appears as a kind of anthropological duty. We all human beings, we all have to work, to take efforts to completely develop the germs and the dispositions that make us rational and not just instinctive animals. And in this vein, in following this argument, at the end of the passage I quote from the lectures of pedagogy, Kant states the child must have time to relax, but there must also be a time to work, a time for it to work. This is, in my view, very important because Kant is focusing here on something that, for example, in paragraph 87 of the Anthropology from a Pragmatic Standpoint also appears. In this paragraph, analyzing, treating what could be the highest physical good, for Kant is completely necessary that to enjoy leisure, to have free time, has to come, the price to it is to have work previously. If you don't have worked previously, you will not have any right to have leisure, to relax, to feel free from the pressures of the work, of the labor. So this alternate rhythm between work and leisure contains an anthropological theory, but in my view also an ideological theory, an ideological embedment. There is an ideological embedment of this anthropological theory, because Kant expresses in this kind of texts that, for example, he despises the kind of relation to work that the so-called savage people, under brackets, have. For example, as you see in a lecture of anthropology, in the lecture of anthropology Friedlander, in the sentence I highlight, Kant states that the savage is lazy because he has no needs. So that the savage people, the savage subject, has not a healthy relationship with work because he's not used, he's supposedly, allegedly not educated, has not been educated in a culture of work. So he could not be civilized and also moralized because he's acquainted with a culture where work does not fulfill a central role. I think that this kind of Kant's statements, according to Joachim Luadler, I'm thinking in the recent book of Luadler about Kant racism, I think is very difficult to disguise that this kind of statements incur in a need, in a very visible racism. So when Kant speaks about work, about labor, also about the difference between work and labor, and this alternate, this necessity to conflate work and leisure, I think he's also undergoing a big influence of ideological patterns, concretely racism, racist biases that have a deep impact in his theory. I would like also mention in this first section the fact that we could say from the passage of the anthropology from a pragmatic standpoint that as work is a universal necessity for all human beings, we could say that work will make human beings more equals among them. So this could be a conclusion drawn from this anthropology lectures or from the published lecture, the anthropology from a pragmatic point of view. Yet Kant's account of work displays very different attitudes to work. For example, if I am a subject, a wealthy subject, or if I am the head of a household, or if I am a vulnerable subject, if I am a woman, if I am a racialized man or woman, if I am a peasant and not an urban subject, I will have a different attitude compared with, for example, a wealthy head of a good European family, a European family with a big patrimony, well off and capable of what I mentioned before, capable to outsource the caregiving and all the tasks related with the social reproduction of life. So I think this is very important also to mention, to highlight the fact that if we see the text from an abstract point of view, we could say work is a universal need, and work is a sort of means to make more equal all the subjects. But if we apply this intersectional and this non-ideal reading of Kant's writings, we begin to see all these differences between the subjects according to the social position they have. I move to the second part of my presentation. I move to the interaction between labor and citizenship in Kant's republicanism, where civil self-sufficiency, I prefer this translation of the German war instead of independence, as an ideal, a republican ideal, a civil ideal. I move in this section from a very well-known Kant's distinction in political philosophy, in Kant's political philosophy, between passive and active citizens. Kant addresses this distinction, and he shows also some misgivings against this distinction because it's not a very clear one. It's not a Cartesian distinction between these two positions with regard to the Commonwealth and to the political partake in the issues discussed in the Commonwealth, in the paragraph 46 of the Doctrine of Right. Here we find this very renowned passage by Kant, where he begins to pass out, to break down the differences between passive and active citizenship, taking as thread the professional activity people perform. And so he begins saying that the good cutter I hire to work in my yard, the blacksmith in India who goes into people's houses to work on iron with his hammer, anvil, and bellows, as compared with the European carpenter or blacksmith who can put the products of his work up as goods for sale to the public, the private tutor as compared with the school teacher, the tenant farmer as compared with the leasehold farmer, and so forth. These are, Kant states, draw this conclusion after having listed all these different species of dependent and independent work. These are mere underlings of the Commonwealth because they have to be under the direction or protection of other individuals and so don't possess civil independence. I highlighted in this Kant's passage the words good cutter, the blacksmith in India, the private tutor. Kant himself was private tutor during 100 years, the tenant farmer, all these examples of work are examples of dependent work, and so of a work that make the subjects just passive citizens, and so they're called underlings of the Commonwealth. They are a sort of parasites for the Commonwealth, for the state, because they have not an active contribution to the issues, to the contents of the state. Here I display some interpretative discussion about how to address, how to understand the main difference between dependent worker and independent worker in Kant's political philosophy. I'm quite convinced by Davies' authority reading, even if I consider that Luke Davies' reading could also be considered or could also be reduced to a revised economic reading of this passage. I try to better explain myself. I consider that the main difference between dependent and independent work is not directly related to the fact that one worker has proprieties or one worker has any proprieties, has any possession, and so is forced to put her own forces directly at disposal of potential clients or potential bosses in the labor market. I have the impression that naturally, the good cutter, the blacksmith in India, the private tutor, the tenant farmer, they offer their services to people, and so they have to wait others to have this initiative to ask them for carry out a service. So that the fact that I appear in the public market, in the labor market, as a person that has not a product of her own to sell this product in the market, and if I have to put my own energies, my own force at disposal of others, this makes a very big difference in Kant's political account. According to Davies, I read the passage because I think it's very insightful, but I recall that I will interpret Davies' account in the sense of economic dependence. The authority reading of this text, of this Kant's passage, could be also understand under this key role of economic dependence or independence. Davies claims that the relevant difference in the way in which they interact is the way in which they interact with those who employ them. The relevant difference between the dependent workers and the independent workers hinges on how they interact with the people who are their employers. Barbers depend on the authority of others in the sense that they rely on the permission of others in order to provide their service. Wig makers don't depend on others in this way when they sell the goods they have produces. This text hints to another Kant's text, another very well known Kant's text, which I will treat in the next slide. In my view, this is also a polemic issue in Kant's interpretation, in current Kant's interpretation. In my view, Kant does not consider in any writing, in theory and practice, in the doctrine of right, that the state should homogenize wealthy householders and laborers, or that the state should make more equals, or should help make more equals dependent or independent workers. For example, Nicholas Brusalis has suggested an interpretation going in this direction. Kant is very comfortable with the definition of a civil union, not as an horizontal space, but as a space, a commonwealth, where subordination plays a role. And I think this is also, or this could be also an effect of an ideological address of labor. Next passage that I mentioned before from the writing theory and practice is also very, very well known, very much addressed when we work these issues in Kant's legal and political philosophy. And here Kant makes the difference and makes the comparison between the dependence of the barber. He makes a comparison between the dependence of the barber and the independence of the wig maker. The wig maker perhaps receives the hair, the raw material to do the wig from the client. But as Raidar Malik's recalls in Kant's politics in context, the wig maker has the design, possesses the design of the wig. So he cannot be expropriated from this power over his own product. For example, the laborer is the vulnerability and the dependence of the laborer is contrast with the independence of the artist, of the tradesman. The tradesman has products that he sells in the market. And I would say that according to this text of theory of practice that I don't read complete because we have no time, but you can follow in the slide. I think that the main difference working in this passage is the difference between the fact that some workers have an opus, have a product. The wig maker has a product, an own product that he designs and that he elaborates, that he brings about, and the workers that just have his own opera, his own forces, his own energies, and they put these energies at disposal of the people that hire their force to carry out a service, a concrete service. The laborer is forced, so to say, and I think I see some pre-Marxist traits in this Kant's analysis. The laborer, the dependent worker, is forced to offer his own workforce in the market, and this is a lack of autonomy. It's not autonomous to bring about a product and to put it in the market to be purchased. I think this difference between the laborer and the craftsman is a also very important part of Kant's account of labor that Jordan Pascoe has very completely systematically analyzed it in his Kant theory of labor, in his element in Cambridge University Press. I close this part of my presentation displaying a kind of summary of the kinds of acquisition contracts of letting and hiring that Kant considers possible in his doctrine of right. All the three contracts of letting and hiring that are very important to understand dependent work are part of private right, and concretely, specifically, the second form of locatio conductio of these acquisition contracts, always following these Latin terms that give a basis in natural right, in Roman natural right, to Kant's doctrine of right, critical doctrine of right. The second species of these contracts allows to grant another the use of one's own forces for an agreed price. This is the locatio operae. It's important to highlight that here does not appear locatio operis, but locatio operae. Locatio, I give my workforce. I let my workforce get hired by a person interested in my services. The third type of these acquisition contracts is, for example, the empowering, to empower someone as a managerial agent for managing a business or a shop. And for example, all the European travelers that are also traders that Kant mentions in his critics of colonialism have signed this kind of contract because they have a mandatum from a firm or from a national government, a European government, and so they travel through the world, closing agreements, but also trying to colonize third countries in America, and also in other continents. What I would like to highlight here is the fact that through this labor contract, this the locatio operae, the worker is merely hired and so becomes a mercenarius, a hired help of others. And so he renounces, he waives his right to political participation, to be considered a co-lawgiver by the state. Within this entangled field of dependent work in Kant's legal philosophy, I think that the case of domestic servants is a very curious one. I will try in this last part of my presentation to address the fact that the household and the needs of the household might be a source of social oppression, a neglected or a hidden source of social oppression that we can also follow in Kant's texts and writings. I will begin by mentioning that Kant was aware that Prussian Junkers, these heirs of feudal lords in German territory, in Prussia, had enslaved their domestic servants through a largely agrarian economy and through the years, the centuries, and that peasantry labor force needed legal protection. I think that Kant was aware that republicanism ought to give a legal shelter, offer a legal shelter to people especially vulnerable as the potential domestic servants of well-off families, and both in rural and in urban areas. I think this is a very key part of Kant's address, Kant's interest of this sort of dependent workers. There is a history, a social history also of this attention Kant hits to this special case. the relation, the link that the domestic worker has to the family, which he has to care, he has to serve, belongs to a part, a section of private right that Kant is aware didn't exist before. This is the right to a person akin to the right to a thing that we see argumentated and displayed in the doctrine of right. Kant is also aware that this formulation is not a very sympathetic one to become a person, to maintain the status of a person, of a human being, but allowing the right to other to treat me like a thing. This has something contradictory inside. This formulation is a very, very difficult one. But if we compare this formulation, this right to a person akin to the right to a thing, this combination, this formula that conflates the status of a person with the status of a thing, we find the same situation in the marriage. The marriage through the legitimation of sexual intercourse also makes the husband for the wife for the husband in sexual intercourse to a thing, and also the offspring of a household is reduced till have the due age to become independent. Also, the offspring is a kind of thing. They maintain the status of a person, but they are a possession of the marriage found in this household. And I think this somehow contradictory formula receives new light if we hit the due attention to the fact that Kant considers the household servants, the domestic servants, as people, as we see in the Doctrine of Right in page 360, as people, as servants that have to do whatever is permissible for the welfare of the household. To do whatever is permissible for the welfare of the household entails to be 24 hours at disposal to the requirements of the family, the head of the family, but also the wife, also the offspring. They can call you in the middle of the night because they are thirsty, because they have some necessity, and you have to cover this necessity. You have to serve them. Naturally, Kant is very interested in the fact of breaking down, of make a difference between the status that is not a legal status of the slave. Domestic servants cannot be slaves, and so the wealthy heads of the families, of the European families, capable of outsourcing all these caregiving tasks, they are not allowed to enslave domestic servants, but they can hire the workforce of these peasants, racialized men, women. Often colonialism gives wealthy European families the opportunity to hire these domestic servants, and so they are hired for a temporary space. They can close, they can free themselves from this work, but probably to enter into another service with another family. So I think Kant is not facing directly the domination structure underpinning this labor relation. And so finally, I will like to to try to highlight some conclusions from the path I presented. First of all, I think that a contemporary reading of Kant's writings on labor and citizenship, on political participation condition, might urge to redress the structures, to transform the structures, ruling the bonds between male and women, household owners and civil servants, well-off women that can outsource the breeding of their offspring, and racialized servants. So to put into accordance the social community and the social distribution of work with the commitments of innate right, first, and also civil republican principles as universal goals, to put a society, a commonwealth, into accordance with innate right, and also with the big budgets of Kant's republicanism, freedom, equality, and civil self-sufficiency. We have to try to make a society more aware about these domination structures underpinning labor relations, and to try to build up a more inclusive theory of citizenship. I quote a passage from Elvira Besevich, which I see also, I view as a very insightful research, focusing on this kind of Kant's writings, and I would like finally to encourage this kind of readings of Kant's legal and political philosophy, displaying these non-ideal features of his writings, because precisely these non-ideal features give us the opportunity to redress his ideological patterns, and also to freedom his own republican model from the burden of this ideological, racist, genderist, and classist points of view that do not allow us at some point to completely assume the content of his analysis. Thank you very much for your attention, and I hope the presentation was of your interest, and I open to the discussion at the end of the session. Thank you very much. I display also the references of my paper, because perhaps are of your interest, and thank you for your attention and your patience.